Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David McLean, and I will be one of the co-sponsors today, and I will walk you through the next 45, 50 minutes on the Texas launch of the Autocase environmental justice tool. Today, we will have myself, co-founder of NAACP, one of our co-founders for the Texas Sustainable Business Network is sick today, as is the executive director who's moving all the stuff in the background, Grace Rodriguez. So Grace is the executive director of Impact Hub Houston. I've worked with Grace now for almost 3 years. She has, as she says, for the last 2 decades, she's shaped programs and spread ideas and spurred actions for numerous initiatives. I have not met anybody more dedicated to doing good and finding people that are doing good and helping them do great. So it's great to have Impact Hub involved, and I am a member, just full disclosure, and I am drawn to that organization because of their close relationship with sustainable development goals. Next up, we have so I'm going to talk about the Texas Sustainable Business Network because Ann, our other co-founder, was unable to be here today. She's ill. And as a co-founder of the Texas Sustainable Business Network, this organization is an affiliate of the American Sustainable Business Network, a 25,000 business member strong organization dedicated to changing policy. Here in Texas, our goal is to foster and grow a Texas ecosystem that's an inspirational model for collaboration and mentorship, and for all Texas businesses and organizations that want to improve their environmental, social governance impacts. Next slide, please. Okay, so Jonathan is the executive director of Usgbc Texas. He'll be our first presenter today. I've worked with Jonathan now for almost 16 years. We do a lot of stuff together. I am one of the founding board members with Jonathan. He's been the executive director that I've worked with since 2015, when the Texas chapter was formalized under 4 other individual chapters. And he has been awarded the President's Volunteer Service Award from the President of the United States for his efforts. So I'm always inspired when I work with Jonathan. So Jonathan's going to start off and talk about environmental justice and Usgbc Texas. So Jonathan, you're up.
Thank you, David. Next slide, please, Grace. As David said, I'm the executive director for the U.S. Green Building Council's Texas chapter. I recognize some of the folks who are on the call today who have been longtime members of Usgbc Texas. Several of our board members are on as well. Thank you all for joining us today. Over the past several years, we took a hard look at what our mission and vision and our strategic plan look like. And most people think Usgbc, we do LEED, we do green buildings. As we've really taken a look at how we can impact things, we've come up with 4 pillars for what we're actually working on. Sustainability and sustainable development is obviously still one of those. Health and wellness within those buildings, resilience, and equity. And those are pieces that we have been weaving into everything we've been doing for the past several years. But with our new strategic plan, we put that front and center, literally on the cover, saying that's what we're working for. Next slide, please. So looking at social equity, according to LEED social equity credits, social equity is fair and just access to livelihood, education, and resources, full participation for all in the political and cultural life of the community, and self-determination in meeting fundamental needs. This encompasses equal opportunity and treatment for anyone, anywhere, whose life, livelihood, or well-being may be directly or indirectly affected by the making and use of the built environment. and for a specific focus on the needs of frontline populations. So hence everybody, because everybody is impacted by our built environment. Next slide, please. I'm sure many of you recognize the diagram looking at the triple bottom line. And the framework is an evaluation for performance in three parts: social, environmental, and financial. I know David and I have had hundreds of conversations about triple bottom line and how it impacts all the projects that we're working on, as well as policy and other developments across our communities. So social equity addresses a wide range of activities, from resource extraction to construction of new buildings to operation of those buildings. It means people have fair access to resources and opportunities for employment. And many definitions mention social equity as a principle in which people enjoy livability and viability now and into the future. So many times we get into how to change, how do the decisions we make affect and change each of these pieces. So next slide. So sticking with Venn diagrams for a second. According to the Equity Design Collaborative, equity design is a creative process to dismantle systems of oppression and design a redesign toward liberation and healing by centering the power of communities historically impacted by the oppressive systems being redesigned. Equity design uses this targeted approach to achieve change. This focus is coming to the forefront in the design world due to mass protesting across the world against racist systems, including individuals of color. Designers are taking it upon themselves to help tear down systems of oppression and to redesign these systems into communities that are facing this the most. So we're looking at what are the tools that people can use to combat these issues that we've been facing many times for decades or even longer in many of the communities that we're working in. Next slide, please. So the USGBC's equity framework offers three main areas of impact to consider when assessing the effects of the built environment on social equity. Looking at enhanced community and quality of life, how to promote human health and well-being and vitality, and how to build a greener community. This helps projects to engage, respect, and contribute to local communities, to increase access to necessities or amenities for all, such as employment, education, healthcare, healthy food, civic and public spaces, as well as retail and recreation. Looking at respect for basic human rights for all people, and projects create a strong sense of place and elevate the spirit of all. Next, please. So the framework for the LEED social equity pilot credits enable projects to consider at least three types of stakeholders: the community, the project team, and the supply chain. The community and project team are fairly regular definitions that we would be looking at. When we get into looking at supply chain, it's people involved and impacted by the production or disposal of resources or materials used in the project, including those directly involved with the supply chain, as well as those impacted indirectly by the pollution and other aspects of those processes. So this does get into a far-reaching look into the impact of a project, not just on the site where the finished building actually sits. So LEED explicitly promotes socially responsible practices in its social equity pilot credits. These are developed by the LEED Social Equity Working Group, and which has been in existence for a number of years and has continued to refine its message in this. So these credits are designed to address social equity from the perspective of everyone who is touched or impacted by a building. the building's construction workers, designers, engineers, other project team members, surrounding community, and those involved in the material supply chain, as well as those who will eventually use and operate the building as well. More than 400 registered projects are currently pursuing these credits with their current certification processes. So getting back to the greater principles behind this, and this will kind of transition more into where Simon is going to be looking at how this is actually evaluated. These are looking at equity, diversity on the project team, inclusion and inclusivity of the community are all pieces that are part of this evaluation process. I will drop a couple of links into the chat, one to the social equity toolkit, as well as to another look at what is proposed as a future of LEAD, which incorporates these concepts pretty heavily as well. So with that, David, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Simon.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Yeah, so one of the reasons, before I introduce Simon is, the U.S. Green Building Council recognizes that we have institutionalized obstacles that are preventing the immediate deployment of proven best practice designs, technologies, and solutions that can bring real change and provide everyone with healthier, more efficient, and more prosperous places to live, learn, work, and play. The intent of today's presentation is to not address all the implications of environmental justice, but to focus on the built environment specifically and how we can conceive, design, construct, and operate our buildings and communities in a way that provides this all the benefits of proven best practices immediately. So I'm going to turn it over to Simon. Simon and I have worked extensively over the last couple of years. He's dedicated the last 9 years of his career to building a business case for environmental sustainability and quantifying the financial, social, and environmental impact of green buildings and property designs around the U.S. So Simon, take it away.
All right, thanks, David. And yeah, thanks, Jonathan, for doing that nice setup there. I think that really frames what we're about to show. Great, so what I might do is I might try and share my screen here because there's some animations on my slide. So if this works, let me see. Can you all see my slides here?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, what I'm going to introduce today is kind of the culmination of almost 2 years of work with a number of different stakeholders. And yeah, we recently launched the Building Environmental Justice tool in partnership with a number of co-creators, but developed by Autocase, which is the company that I've worked for the past 5 years. And we, as David mentioned, build a business case for sustainable design. But this is a free tool online that we launched just about 2 weeks ago now. So I wanted to give maybe a very brief history lesson of how the tool came about, show the tool in action, and then maybe even spend a bit of time, just whoever wants to get a login set up. It takes 2 minutes. Do it yourself. I think that could be a good use of our time as well. So yeah, this all came about really, as I said, around 2 years ago, and a group of the AIA's Large Firm Roundtable and many others, I think, were really asking themselves this question in terms of what can we as designers, builders, the design community, what can we do to address social equity and environmental justice in the work that we do? And specifically, a question came up in those conversations around, is there a tool that we can develop, an online tool that we can develop to help drive systemic change? And really the answer to that was no. The group of these large firms are saying, no, we don't really have the in-house expertise to build a tool. And so that's why this group approached Autocase, because we already develop cloud-based sustainability analytic tools. And so they came to us, asked us, can we partner in some way to do this? And we were like, yeah, let's try and work something out. And throughout the next several months, we gathered a series of steering committee members that were formed from Stantec, Quinn Evans, Jacobs, DLR Group, as well as members from NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects, as well as the NAACP's Centering Equity in the Sustainable Building Sector group. So we tried to have a diverse group from both the design community as well as more of the community advocacy and environmental justice practitioner side of things. So we were generously funded by these 4 firms, which was matched by the AIA's CEO group as well. So we got some funding to get this initiative off the ground and build something. And as I mentioned, just in late May, or that should say 2022, sorry, the tool was launched. So I'm a year behind on that. I'm not going to really touch too heavily on this because I think Jonathan did a good job of defining environmental justice, but I just want to put this up so that there's a reference around like how the EPA is defining it. And I know that's not the only definition that's out there, but I think just to touch on these 2 aspects around fair treatment and meaningful involvement, because I think those were 2 of the core principles that really drove what we wanted this building environmental justice tool to be about. Really trying to get to the heart of how can we build a tool for the building community that makes sure that there is fair treatment and allows for active and meaningful involvement from different stakeholders. So a lot of words on this screen. Don't expect you to read through it right now, but just know that these were kind of the principles that we tried to apply, less so from the policy standpoint, which is where the EPA is looking at it, but how can we reflect that for individual projects? So through this year-long steering committee conversation, as well as conversations with other stakeholders along the way, there were some really key themes and needs that emerged from those 2 sides of the table, really, in terms of the designers and more of the practitioners. That first one being on the design side, they wanted to know, what does environmental justice mean on a project, and how do we build that into all of our projects in a systematic way? And then from the advocacy side, there was more of a need to have a way to understand and get transparency into projects that are happening in the areas that like frontline communities are living in. So how do you bridge that gap? And I'll show you the tools that we built to address those. Secondly, again, on the design side, I think data collection is a really big obstacle. What data is there? How do we get it? How do we get it quickly and early? And then again, with this data theme for the practitioner side of things, it's more, how do we justify the concerns that we've been talking about in a more quantitative way? How do we justify them through data? And then again, for the designers, there was a need to understand, like, who do we need to bring in to these conversations? Who do we bring into projects early? How do we get access to this on the ground knowledge, and partner with the right people, not asking for volunteer time here? How do we engage formally in a project so that we can get them into our project team? And on the flip side of that, the practitioners want to be able to be part of projects, actively engage and participate in that co-creation of a more equitable project that addresses their needs. One thing here that I just wanted to call out was that both parties really were keen on: how do we quantify the impact of the project's design? And that was really something that was too big to bite off in this first phase of the project for the tool. So the tool that I'll show you addresses these elements. It doesn't address this, although that was a need that did come out of the conversations that we had. So yeah, we built the Building Environmental Justice tool. It's free, it's online, it's geared towards the design community, whether that is the architects, engineers, or the people being affected by design, and the community-based organizations that often represent or can speak for those frontline communities. So it's aimed for both sides of the table. And really the idea is that it's trying to bring together frameworks for environmental justice, data, and people into one tool or one platform, so that these kinds of issues can be discussed early and often and throughout a project. I think this is the last slide here. So after this, we'll be able to dive into the tool. The Building EJ tool has 4 modules. The first one is a project tool. And what this allows design teams to do is to create projects, put in their address, and immediately get a whole bunch of great data on that specific project neighborhood. And then it also follows, so Jonathan mentioned the different social equity aspects that LEAD and the USGBC have created. We're actually leveraging the USGBC's social equity questionnaire and checklist, so that project teams can have this interactive way to answer questions, address them on a project by project basis. Secondly, we've got the Find People module. And this module allows environmental justice practitioners to create profiles. Think of it almost like a LinkedIn, where you can create a public or private profile. And design teams can then use this as a directory to formally reach out and engage with these folks, to bring them into projects and try and tap into that local knowledge. The third tool here, again, is that bridge building exercise, but this time more for the environmental justice practitioners to reach out to project teams. So as a designer, you can make a project public or keep it private. And if you make it public, then that allows these people to reach out to you. And lastly, we know that this isn't the only tool or framework or data out there. So we've done our best to create a pretty comprehensive list of other tools and frameworks and research that we think is worthwhile, and just putting it into one place. So with that, I'm going to actually show you the tool in action. So the tool can actually just be reached by going to this URL, ejtoolkit.com, or you can do a Google search for Autocase environmental justice or building environmental justice tool. I think we rank on Google. So this is just the home page. And then what you can do is start the app. And then this, as you can see, these are the 4 modules that I was going over just a second ago on that last slide. So when you first open up the app, it's going to take you to the public facing dashboard. So you can start to explore some of the projects that have already been created, already been made public. We've had over 1,000 people kind of go to the site. We've had, I think, over 100 people create accounts in the past week or so. So there are lots of other projects that are hidden that just haven't been made public yet. So if I go to the projects that I myself have just created as testers here, I'm going to go into this one, and all we're asking for here is the street address. And what that does is it's going to bring in a whole bunch of really fantastic information that might take hours or days for a designer to go and find. So we've got things like, what is the housing costs? What's the utility rates? The unemployment rate for that area? Educational attainment? Things around traffic or potential exposure to lead paint, and some key health indices for that neighborhood. We've also got useful environmental data around the local air quality, future climate change projections. So how many millimeters of rain can you expect in each month under different climate scenarios? Same thing for how many days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit can you expect? There's also a really nice tool called Climate Check that have given us free access to their climate risk widget. So this gives you a bit of a snapshot of just some of the key climate risks that this community might face. And then this is a really great feature in the tool, because what we're doing is we're tapping into OpenStreetMap. So we're using your location of the project and saying what amenities are within walking distance of the site, or in many disadvantaged communities, what might be lacking from an amenity standpoint, and maybe that can help inform some of the programmatic elements that you as a designer might try and address. So you can start to say, what access to financial facilities do they have? Food desertification. Are there any parks nearby? Public transit, things like that. So you can start to get a sense of what's within walking distance. And then some demographic information as well. And we're providing the links to where we're getting all of this information as well. So a lot of it is coming from the EPA's EJ screen. Great tool. I recommend people exploring that as well. And some of it we're collecting from different sources. So that's just the first bit of this project tool, is really getting that data, having kind of a dashboard of where a community, if you look here, anywhere that's green might suggest, oh, it's doing better than the national average. Anywhere that's red might be an indication of, oh, this is something of a concern. So you can start to pick out those needs. So then we've actually also created the toolkit, as I mentioned, that's based off the Usgbc's project team checklist. And we've provided a link to that in the tool as well. So for any of you doing the Lead V 4.1, going for the integrative process, there's actually a social equity element here. And we're following this lead project team checklist for social impact. So actually by filling this in, by using the tool, you can help contribute to this integrative process credit. So there are 4 key modules here within the toolkit. We've got equitable project teams, equitable process, design, and supply. So a lot of the things that Jonathan was also talking about there. And what you do as a designer using this tool is you'd go into each of these modules, you'd click in, read the question. So have you analyzed the makeup of the users and surrounding community, for example? You can say, yes, we have, no, we haven't, or we need to look into this further. You can start to add in some kind of answer to that question. And then if you want to or have some kind of justification or evidence to back that up, you can actually upload that here in the tool as well. So it starts to become this repository of information. And so, yeah, we can start to fill in each of these different modules as much or as little as you want. And again, this is supposed to be done early and often, not just like a one-time thing or a 1 hour thing. This is definitely meant to be comprehensive. Then we've also added the ability to conduct a community needs assessment. So based off the data that we provide, that you go out and find, as well as the conversations that you have with stakeholders, you can start to add in what are the needs of the community. Based off those needs, what are some of the project goals or the response of the design to meet those needs and the kind of impact that might have as a result. So we think that this is a really great way for you to record that and use it as a way to identify some of the equity goals on the project. We've also created this way for you to keep track of stakeholders. Or maybe a better way to say that is to keep track of the conversations you've had with stakeholders and keep a list of who you've spoken to, what they may have said. So that's the way that you can start to add in information here. And we've created a summary report. So if you are going for that integrative process, or if you just want to be able to have all of that information in one place, you can print it out and upload it with your other documentation as you normally would. So that's the project tool. And as I mentioned, you can actually make the project public or private. So if you make the project public, it's going to show up on this public facing dashboard. If you make it private, it's not. So we've had a lot of people already come to us and say we're not ready yet for our project to be made public, or we don't want to put it on the public facing dashboard. And I've just reassured them that, yep, for while you're filling it in, or for however long you want to use the tool, you can choose to make it private. So as a community advocate, or if you wanted to see some of the other projects that have been using the tool, this is one that I didn't create, but you can still go in, you can see the same kind of data that the design team have access to. You can see what they've made public or private. So in this case, this team has made their project teams page public, but made the rest of it private. So it gives you that flexibility to make different modules accessible. So you can see the kinds of answers that they've put in to the tool. And if you wanted to, you could actually reach out to the person who created this project to find out more, to get involved, to be kind of formally try to be part of the project team if you wanted to do that. So there's a way for like a messaging system within the tool. One of the last things here that I wanted to show you is the Find People module. So feel free when you create an account to also create a profile if you wanted to. If you wanted to be put on this directory as a environmental justice practitioner or a community advocate or a design professional interested in this space, you can start to create public or private profiles and specify your expertise in this field, the areas that you work in. So me as a design team, if I was creating a project and I wanted to, I felt like I was lacking an on-the-ground expert in the neighborhood that I'm working in related to resilience, what I could do was start to filter my search and reach out to some of these folks. I can read more about them, and then I can actually contact them again. So there's this way to try and build those bridges between the designers and the community advocates themselves. So then the last thing here is the resources page. And we know that there's a whole bunch of other great tools out there that are showing great data. So we spent a long time trying to find as many great data sources, whether it be national or more local, map-based, dashboards, things like that. So there's some fantastic things here that I think is well worth visiting, and I especially want to call out this one actually. This is showing kind of redlining. If we were to go, let's say to Houston, gives you an idea of the historical redlining maps that happened. And if you click on them, oftentimes they'll come up with actual information on this specific neighborhood. So it gives you a sense of why some of the injustices that we see today have occurred, because these often map very closely to the disadvantaged communities in more modern maps. So let's see. Yep, we've got other organizations, other guides and frameworks as well. So there's a lot of great information out there, and definitely encourage explore all of these different modules, create an account, and feel free to reach out with any questions or feedback as you go through it. So yeah, back over to you, David, and I just wanted to say thanks for letting me share this. It's really new, and we're really excited about it, getting a lot of great feedback.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, we've been extremely excited about seeing this roll out. I mean, this is obviously we're going to have some continual training on this. I think that one of the exciting parts for me of any tool like this is it creates what I like to call decision-ready data. A lot of times the community activists and advocates for environmental justice have to pay money to get access to this information and have a professional correlate it all together. And at the same time, it just seems like it's an arduous task. Having brought all of that information together where anybody could use it, and we're going to make sure that we provide enough training so that any community activist can come in here and generate their own report and go as deep as they need to, and that we can set up some sort of vetting process for at least our Texas communities on getting this information into the hands of our elected officials, our municipality leaders, so that they can start internalizing the real information that's available. It gives them the ammunition so we can not only make immediate impacts on projects we're working on consistently, but also to, which I think is also as important, is create long-term permanent behavior and policy change. So I really thank you for the effort that you put into this. It really does create an opportunity to connect the data to real life benefits. This is a very emotional issue as it because the disparity has just been incredible. We don't talk about the fact that, well, is there environmental injustice? Everybody knows because we don't need another case study to know that that's the case. It's now we can get down and impact real immediate change. So I'm really super excited about that. So I don't know whether we have any questions right now. I have one to Simon insofar as you've pulled these four things together. The comparative part of this, I mean, you and I have had conversations on this privately, but the next step then is to be able to monetize or quantify all of these different data points around, here's how much more prosperous or here's how much less or better environmental justice is in this community. That when do you think, or is that still in the works for the evolution of this tool, the next step?
Yeah, I think there's like a few different ways that because this was like a first phase on a pretty small budget and unfortunately a pretty small steering committee and stakeholder outreach group. So I think for a future phase, we'd love to have like a much longer, much larger stakeholder outreach effort. But I think some of the avenues that this could go are, one, expanding it geographically. So right now it's just for the US. We've had people from the UK, Canada, elsewhere say, can we get access to this data for our own location? So that's one potential avenue. Another one is that we've been having some preliminary discussions with the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. So this tool again is for vertical infrastructure. We're using the lead Usgbc toolkit. For any folks out there familiar with Envision, the Envision framework, they also have an environmental justice, social equity set of questions. So maybe having a kind of being able to use it for a different kind of project. And then David, as you mentioned there, like what can we quantify out of some of these aspects? And that is a really mammoth task, as I put on one of those slides, is like everybody wanted it, but it can't be done, or couldn't be done in this first phase of the tool. So being able to understand from stakeholders, what should we be quantifying? How do we quantify it? Things like that. I think that would be really, really valuable to hammer home, like this is the impact on the communities in, around, or maybe even upstream or downstream from the project. So right. Yeah, that would be great.
I think that the steering committee will come if people start using this tool. They'll ask for more stuff, and you'll get all kinds of feedback. That's my hope. And we will push within the organizations represented here today that this tool be used, its framework be used on every project. So I don't think that that's an unrealistic expectation, especially in those communities like the those areas of Houston, complete communities. So why wouldn't the complete communities want to use this tool and demand that it be used? And then it becomes a normal part of the design process. So I'm excited about that. I do have a question here on, so we're just starting to fill out and self-identify as experts, as projects and as practitioners of this. They're obviously, we all think, we all think we do great work, but I think some some training or some vetting process would be important for someone who's just coming in here and saying, hey, I'm a environmental justice expert. Do you see any, vetting process happening on that?
Yeah, that was something that we went back and forth on a little bit. And in the end, we allowed people to self-select, because this directory is not meant to be just like the design professional side of things. This could be a member of a community-based organization, or it could just be somebody who is really well connected within a neighborhood that knows how to get a message out to a group of people. And so internally, we didn't think that we could come up with a good vetting process for that, because like, who are we to say whether somebody is like well connected or not? So that's something that we can and probably will revisit, depending on how that directory or list of people grows over time and how it's potentially used. So yeah, that's kind of my answer for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's super important that we have a very diverse set of professionals. It is still an emerging, I don't even know that the emerging profession is the right term, but it is so connected to everything that we do in the built environment, but it also touches so many other historical and emotional and personal issues. And
can
yeah.
Would I be able to just ask the design teams on the call if they have good connections with community-based organizations or people that they've worked with before, to maybe encourage them to look at the tool first and foremost, and then if they feel comfortable creating a public or a private account, the more people that start using it and creating profiles, the more value that it will bring. So feel free, and we encourage you to share it.
All right, well, we'll figure out, Simon, how to do that within these organizations represented here today. I'm just looking through the questions here. I think we answered that one. So one of the questions, would it be beneficial to list projects already built and use the tool for further information and, I guess, a development of new projects, or to do kind of a forensic analysis of projects just to see how they fare in this new lens? I think it could be used in that means, right, Simon?
Yeah, I'm actually going to reshare my screen here a second. So you can basically, when you're creating a project, you can say you're just testing it on a hypothetical project. It doesn't have to be real. You can do it on, like, for any address in the US. Doesn't have to be a real project. Then you can start to say, well, yeah, we've got a project that we want to use it on in the planning stage. And then if you wanted to think of how did we more retroactively assess how you evaluated or incorporated environmental justice, for sure, like, we encourage you to use it as like a case study that you can then learn from internally.
Okay, great, fantastic. So we're coming up on the end. I don't see any other questions. Any other panelists have any questions, follow up? Like I said, we will have more in-depth training on this. So I'll be reaching out to Simon to actually probably walk through a whole project. We'll spend a whole hour just doing that. And as we get more engaged within the Texas communities that ask for that type of stuff, we probably will, within the different organizations, hopefully be trained enough to go out and meet in the communities with this tool. I think that would be fantastic. There are training videos, like Simon just put into the lab. There are training videos there to walk through those. But sometimes it's just it's better to walk through a real life scenario to say, hey, well, what if this? What if we did this? So I think a lot of the people on the call would be willing to go out and do this in a community. And like I said, make this an expectation. Jonathan, you had a question?
No, I did see that there was one other question in the chat looking at, is there a future plan to add some kind of score into evaluating a building or evaluating a project based on these criteria?
Yeah, that goes back, I think, to the future phase element. Is that could be something that would be quite beneficial, but just from our conversations, how it's so difficult to measure whether a project is equitable or not, and coming up with a consistent or repeatable way to score projects that might be very different from one another was something that we just couldn't do in this first phase of the tool. But again, would be great to be able to do it.
All right, we're coming up on the end. I want to thank the Usgbc Texas Sustainable Business Network and Impact Hub, and of course Simon with Autocase for bringing this to Texas. And we're gonna work it. We're gonna make it better. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay well.